Hello, everybody, and welcome again back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today, Sean Martin. From the turbulent Bronx housing projects during New York City's crack epidemic, Sean rose as a beacon of resilience, overcoming adversity to become a successful entrepreneur. With multi-million dollar ventures in marketing, event planning, and real estate, he passionately emphasizes the transformative power of mentors and role models in shaping futures. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me, and thank you for that great introduction.
We appreciate having you here, and you have such a wonderful story. But before we get into that, we do like to have an icebreaker on this show. And the question today for you is, which cartoon character do you most resonate with and why?
Easy question. Wow. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Spider-Man. There's a bit of the reluctant hero. He's one of the more popular and one of the strongest superheroes. But he's also a teenager wrestling with acne and puberty and heartbreak and, Mary Jane, and just he has all this other stuff going on in his life. He's mistakenly bit by this spider, and I'll call that this fire. And he has to rise to the occasion. And I think what my life has been about is rising to the occasion. And I guess on short notice, I'll be Spider-Man, only for the reluctant hero part, not the superpowers part. I'm still growing into my own, gifts and talents. But I do know that I have them and they are to be shared for good.
That's an excellent choice. I mean, a little bit of a reluctant hero. I know that sometimes in today's world we have these gifts or we have this purpose, but sometimes we don't step up simply because we're afraid of how we'll be received. But I like that one. I like that analogy of Spider-Man. It's a good one.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, Sean? It's such an amazing one, and tell us how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. I got to be where I am today, first and foremost, through belief. My story starts out in a housing project in the Bronx, New York, where I was born and raised by a single mom whose family and her immigrated here from the Dominican Republic when she was 11. My mother was very bright and was able to finish school. First one of that generation, and until, my cousins, was the first one to ever graduate college. So I had the benefit of growing up with her as my mom, very strong, very compassionate, independent woman, but a single mom. So obviously struggles were prevalent financially, also not having a dad figure. She was both and she did the best that she could. I grew up during the 80s and 90s in New York City, which, if you're familiar, was the heyday, for lack of a better use of the word, of crack cocaine, which essentially destroyed a generation of poor people, predominantly black and brown, not only in New York City, but across the country. And that was the backdrop for my upbringing. So I had this safe, loving home where we had a work ethic and we strived for more. And then we had this environment of instant gratification, sex, drugs, and rock and roll for the better part of my teenage years. It was looking up to drug dealers who had the cool clothes. The girls liked them. Maybe they had a car. Maybe they had an apartment. But looking back, it's hilarious because a lot of the drug dealers live with their mom. So, I mean, how good were they really doing? But, when the bar is set so low, like it is when you're born in poverty or grow up in poverty, you're comparing yourself to everybody around you. And it wasn't until high school, because I played the saxophone, that I got to go to Manhattan every day for high school and music and art, where I really started to learn the value of work and getting better. So learning an instrument, it's all about repetition. And from the fourth grade on through junior high school, and then in high school for performing arts, which is a great school in New York, I got to learn reps, repetition, and practice. There's a lot of practice that goes on, and more practice, you get better. So that was my first delve into developing a work ethic, developed by my mom, and then, the music. But then the pull of the street starts coming. Teenage years, clothing, girls, music, fun, drinking. And that was prevalent where I'm from. So I started to lose focus on the music and started to veer toward the streets. I was missing a lot of class. I was coming home late. There were times when my mother had to go out in the street, pick me out of the street, much to my embarrassment, but much to my well being. Thank God. Pulled me away from a lot of the bad influences in the neighborhood. So I was always straddling the bad influences, but thankfully I was never all in. My mother wouldn't allow it. There's no way I could get away with it and live under a roof. So, thank God for structure and what she implanted. But, fast forward a bit, I go out into the world and, now I'm college educated and I get a job doing sales at Verizon's Yellow Pages. If you want to, go back to the days when that was a thing before the internet was extremely accessible. And I was just very unhappy. I was in a cubicle. I was good at what I did, but it didn't light me up. You're there in a 9 to 5 environment, in a cubicle, cookie cutter, and got the opportunity one day on a phone call. I was trying to sell somebody, and it turns out they ran a radiology facility. And they thought my sales pitch was great, called me in for an interview. That was the end of my office days. And Chris, I never looked back because once you have the ability to make others money, you can call your own shots. So sales, I think, is the best way for an entrepreneur to develop getting comfortable with the idea of hearing no. And in my 20s, that was my thing. I was in sales and I wasn't in any sexy sales jobs. I was door to door, office to office, front desk girls. So I cut my teeth, rank and file sales. But then there's the other side. So much like the teenage years, there's still the pull of the streets. So you got this college educated guy who can put a suit on and talk the talk when it comes to a business owner. But then there's this guy who wants more. The job isn't giving me more. Now I'm going to go back to what I know, which is, hey, let me hustle to get the extras. And sometimes those things were, knockoff clothing from New York City where, poor people can't afford a $150 pair of jeans. So we get them a pair of jeans with the label on it for $30, sell it for 50 or 60. And that's when things started to, okay, the lines start to get skewed. I'm making extra money. I'm making quick money. Then it moves to drugs. And now I'm adding, the clothing thing is like the economy takes a swing in the wrong direction. You know what? People never get tired of buying drugs. So I switched to, selling weed, which in my mind is not a big deal, right? It's weed, which is now legal. But there were also other dry goods and cocaine and things like that, I could get my hands on if I needed and kind of was the go-between to people who wanted something, even though that wasn't my thing, all the while working a job. So go figure. But this lifestyle would eventually catch up to me at the age of 29. I ended up going to jail for 2 years. I was out one night with some friends at a seedy bar, and things just went south, and the streets caught up with me. You can't have one foot in and one foot out, and I did. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Prior to going to prison, I met my now wife. We're 15 years together, going on 11 married, 2 wonderful children, an amazing life. And that all started when I was waiting to turn myself in to go to prison. And then I do my 2 years and she stands by me. And that in of itself is giving me hope. I've got something to come home to. And the good majority of people in prison don't have that. So God put me in that position to knock me on my ass. Number one, because I wasn't going in the right direction. But number two, I believe wholeheartedly they put me in that position so that I could see what it was like to be there without hope. I get emotional because I will never forget waking up in the cells. I will never forget laughing and joking in the day room. And I will never forget that that is a lot of people's day-to-day reality. I met guys that were doing 25 to life and still find a way to have a smile on their face, or have a family. Some guys doing 25 to life and found their wife while they were in prison and then built a family. So put things in perspective for me. And I was fortunate enough to start reading self-development books. This is also the first time in my life where I'm sober for a prolonged period of time. I write down what I feel my life should look like, and I envision and write it down in composition, black and white notebooks like we had back in elementary school. And wouldn't you know it, I come home and I put one foot in front of the other, and I've got the love of my life supporting me, and I've got parole still. So it's not easy, but I fall on my face, I get violated, I go back to prison for 5 months. So my story is full of falling, but not giving up. Getting up, falling, not giving up, getting up, falling, not giving up. And I have been extremely blessed from the years of being released until now to have found financial success in the form of medical supplies, medical billing, real estate. But the only reason that I've been able to find that success, Chris, is because of all the shit that I've been through. It has given me the confidence and the resilience to know that I can do anything and nothing's going to keep me down. And I think that's what most people are missing. They're missing the losses and the getting back up, because that's the only way we build resilience and a winner's mentality.
Such a powerful and moving story. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm sure our listeners also appreciate it. So just to recap, the important things are obviously resilience, structure, discipline, but more than that, learning how to take a hit and keep getting back up. And there's many of us, and I'm not trying to pick on it, not trying to pick on anyone here. I mean, there's enough of us out there that sometimes when we get a hit, we just don't want to try again, right? So definitely that was an excellent story. Let me go into that hearing no. Why do you think hearing no is so important in terms of developing and getting what you want?
I use my 7-year-old daughter as the example. If she wants something, she'll ask me. And if I say no, she'll say, but why not? And then if it's a hard no, at some point she gives up on me, she goes to her mother. And then her mother gives her a hard no. Guess what she does? She comes back to me. So I think it's human nature to have that persistence. And along the way, we lose it. People tell you to be realistic. People tell you to play it safe. Don't take chances. Get a job with benefits and pension. And that's the safe play. That's the safe play. And as human beings, we're designed to seek out safety. And I think the flip side of that is sales. Keep what you kill. You don't sell, you don't eat. And at the end of the day, hearing no is just one step closer to the yes. And it also builds thicker skin. You learn to not take it personally. It's not that you didn't sell the best you could. It's not that you had a wart on your forehead and this is part of the game. You have to go through the no's to get the yeses. I believe the rate at the Yellow Pages was 3%. How many people listening right now, including myself, today would be able to pick up the phone 100 times, hear no 97 times, and then still keep going? And that's essentially what you're doing in sales, is you're hearing no 90 some odd % of the time. And I think that is like going to the gym. It breaks down the muscle so that it can build it back stronger. And I think no is like going to the gym, but for your self-confidence. It's like, no, okay, I'll go to the next person. No, I can't do it. Okay, I'll show you. And, I had a lot of no's early on. I have a lot of life lessons early on. And that has given me the confidence to be where I am today. And I think that anybody that is avoiding hearing the word no is avoiding pain. And the harsh reality, my friends, is unfortunately, pain is the only way we grow. It's the only way we keep things in perspective. And it is the only way that we will appreciate what we have, is knowing what it feels like to not have.
Yeah, that's a very powerful concept, and I know that in many sales coach trainings that I've seen, they like to. There was a very famous experiment that the details escape me, and it's bad because I really want to get back to it. There was this guy who postulated that if you want to get good in sales and you want to develop that sort of thick skin, just go out and just start asking people for the most ridiculous things you can imagine, and just expect that no, right?
Right.
So he'd ask for free refills on his French fries. Sometimes he
Sometimes they say yes.
Sometimes they say yes. I mean, you never know, right? So You know,
My wife, every time we go out to eat, we like Coke Zero. So they have Coke Diet Coke and they have Coke Zero. So Coke Zero, in our opinion, tastes more like the regular Coke. Diet Coke tastes more chemically. So most people carry Diet Coke. I would say 90 something percent. Restaurants. Very few carry Coke Zero. It never stops her from asking for Coke Zero. It sounds like such a stupid example, the French fry refill, the Coke Zero at the restaurant that is probably not going to have it. But you know what? Every once in a while they have it, and it's a pleasant surprise. But you would have never known if you didn't ask. And that's the thing about sales that's so valuable, is you have to ask. And success is the same thing. You have to ask God, the universe, whatever you believe in, you have to ask them for that success. You have to ask them for that guidance. And unfortunately, most people are afraid to even ask, brother. And it sucks. It sucks. I mean, you said it earlier, you didn't want to offend anybody or whatever, but the reality is that some of us are called, and it's upon us to lift others up. Can't just hope that the situation is going to change. We can tell from the history of society that there's always going to be people that elevate themselves in some way, shape, or form. It could be spiritually, it could be financially, it could be physically. There may be a guy who's in the most phenomenal shape, couldn't run a business to save his life, and vice versa. So we all come to the table with things that we are good at. If we've been fortunate enough to step into that at some point in our lives, then we can start to take the steps toward fulfilling something greater than ourselves. Not only does it make us feel good, but it adds value to others. And that's the true secret of being fulfilled in life. It's adding value to the lives of others.
very well said. Very well said. You've been through so much adversity, but what do you think was your biggest challenge out of everything that you passed? And how did you overcome it?
I want to say that raising a family is the hardest thing I've ever done. I got that from a good friend of mine, and I have adopted that and repeat that. And he teases me all the time. He's like, I want a penny for every time you use it. And you know what? He was raised in a big Portuguese family and plenty of aunts and uncles and cousins. And this was normal. So then him and his brother, and multiple kids, big family, they repeated the cycle of what they saw. And family was a big component for that. Me, on the other hand, single mom, I grew up in poverty in the housing projects. Crack cocaine stole a lot of the fathers away, because if they got caught selling crack 3 times, at that time you were doing 25 to life. Now who's watching the kids? If they were even in that family structure, moms, grandmoms, aunts. So what you learn, what you come into life with, is going to have a huge impact on, how you live it. And a lot of my good things have been what has been presented to me, and also the bad things, but I've been able to trim the bad slowly but surely over the years. And not to say there still isn't fat that needs to be trimmed, but I understand the process now. And I have the patience to understand that it's a marathon, and just keep showing up and being consistent. And I have everything I need to accomplish what it is that I want to accomplish.
Excellent. And just going back to that, you've had tons of success, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now?
So I have been fortunate enough through my sales endeavors to fall into the medical space and built a successful first marketing practice. And then I moved on to some medical billing in terms of, helping others build their practices. And then I went off into business for myself, providing durable medical equipment. And so many valuable lessons I've learned along the way. But what I realized was my real strength is relationships. I'm a relationship person. Integrity is high on my list of values. And I think that is what solid relationships are based on. It's authenticity. And I've been able to parlay that into a very successful business. However, I just have this itch, and I know I'm meant for more. And in that prison cell 17 years ago, I even came to the conclusion at that point that my life was about lifting others up, going back to where I came from, empowering, people of color, black and brown, poverty, anywhere. It doesn't matter your color necessarily, but, I'm Hispanic. I grew up around Hispanics and blacks in the Bronx, and that's my tribe. That's my crew. I know their struggle. I've been there, done that, and I know I have the tools now to go back and offer some help, offer some assistance, offer some advice, plant some seeds. And that's really where my life has taken a turn this last couple of years. How can I impact the world using my gifts? First and foremost, that's my family. So I have completely made my life wholeheartedly about them, making sure they're secure, making sure they're getting all the life lessons that I didn't necessarily have and had to learn along the way. And just that process of being a more present dad brought me to the place of, well, I have reserves. I can do more. I can provide for this family and be a leader here, but I can also go out into the world and shine my light and be a leader there. So I came up with the concept of real mentors, real success mentors. And the real stands for real examples altering lives. People like myself who have made it out, but instead of turning their backs and just choosing to move forward and forge a new path outside of that, I wanted to look back and remember where I came from and go lift some people up. So the ultimate goal is to form a nonprofit that teaches people in that community all the things that school won't. School is an extremely important tool to lift oneself out of poverty. However, doesn't matter what color you are or where you're from, school will never teach you how to run a business. School will never teach you to dream big, write down goals, how to attain them, the steps in the process. That is not what they want. They do not want independent thinkers. So again, it's a balance because school is important, but school falls short on a lot of the lessons that we need as entrepreneurs to succeed. And I want to go back and tell people that come from where I come from, that you can do it and you can do it your own way. Because I think coming from that community, you don't see a place for yourself in corporate America. You just don't. It's not you. When you go in a suit and a tie, just like I did early in my career, I had to play a role. That wasn't me. It wasn't until I got the confidence and the wins and my own stack of cash to say, fuck you, I'm going to be who I want to be. This is me. You can't tell me nothing. So now if I go to a meeting and I want to go to a t-shirt, I'm going to t-shirt, whether you're a doctor, an attorney, business person, a finance guy, it doesn't matter. Because I know at the end of the day, they're not judging me on what I'm dressed like. They're judging me on what's coming out of my mouth, my head, and what my heart is all about. And those are only lessons I've been able to learn through making a ton of mistakes, which brings our conversation always full circle back to hearing those no's and why sales was so important to me. So my next chapter is about giving. I'm currently writing a book called Beyond the Bronx, From Streets to Suites, which is going to highlight my bio in the beginning and then go through and tell the life lessons that I've learned. And this will work in conjunction with me and the speaking engagement so that when I go speak to these young adults, these teenagers in at-risk communities, you know, they have a story that they can look to for some hope. And, you know, whether it be me or someone that I meet along the way who shares a similar story of resilience, it will be someone that they can look at and say, well, that guy did it, that woman did it, I can do it too. And I want to build a community of people like myself who care enough to go back, not just make it out and turn their back. And Chris, I'll even add this. As a guy who lives in a very different neighborhood, to say the least, it looks different, it feels different, smells different. Everything's different about where we live now. Even my wife and I talked about it yesterday. We're not exactly comfortable living here because it's so far from our upbringing that it took us 5 or 6 years to even get comfortable to be this uncomfortable. And we're experiencing the pitfalls of raising your kids with so much safety in the suburbs with our daughter now. And I came to the realization that the only way that my daughter is going to have an appreciation for all of the comfort and ease that she has inherited through my wife and I's hard work, she's going to have to see where we came from. So we don't live that life, but I can bring her back there. I can show her how we grew up. And more importantly, I could show her that it's our duty to go back and help those that we can when we can.
That is some very good strategies there and some very good information. And yeah, it's important to volunteer and to not forget how blessed, some of us are, and how some of us just, haven't got that whole grand equality thing, right? Nothing can ever be truly equal or
No,
fair. I mean, it just isn't gonna happen.
nature's not designed that way. And that could start a whole conversation about today's environment. But the reality is, I don't think that human beings are wired any differently. I just think that the external stimulus has changed so dramatically that it's producing a different outcome in terms of how we are as human beings, what our expectations are. I just came from hiking the Grand Canyon last week. And when you get down into the canyon, there's some water sources. Sometimes they're working, sometimes they're not. And that canyon took millions of years to form. We'll be lucky to have 100. But it just puts things in perspective. Running water in the middle of the wilderness because some human being decided to dig a hole and drag a pipe and put a pump and make it convenient for you. And I think that we're taking that for granted, that here in the civilized world, as we like to call it, even though our culture can act pretty uncivilized too, we're blessed to have just been born in a situation where we're not living on pennies or $1 or $2 a day. We go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. One day, put that in perspective and just say thank you. Just say thank you that I can afford a $6 cup of coffee, whereas somebody would have to survive all in on $2 a day somewhere in the world. And it's not that far fetched. If you go to some places in America, there's no social service net, there's no welfare, there's no handouts. You go down south and people are living in extreme poverty right here in the United States. You go upstate New York, there are people living in extreme poverty right here in New York, one of the richest states in the country. So it's all about perspective, Chris. And I think mistakes give us those, gives us a better perspective.
For sure. Our mistakes definitely learn. They give us more information and more learning than our successes do. And actually, I like that acronym for FAIL. It's not mine. I was talking to actually a client of mine, and their daughter was in a theatrical school, and they gave the acronym for FAIL as first attempt at learning.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
I like
so
that.
I thought that was really good, and yeah, not mine, but
Hey, listen,
like steal.
I'm sure it wasn't theirs either. And what I'm learning is through self-development and really diving into learning more about how I work as a human being and my mind. A lot of the information that we value is just information that has been passed down and rewritten and restructured for changing times. I mean, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's just building a more smooth wheel. And many of the lessons that we come to learn have been there all along. Maybe they just weren't ingrained in us or we didn't have the structure to teach us, but we can come to that conclusion on our own. We just have to make the realization that there's a better version of us inside of here. Do we want to do the work to let that person out? And it will take work. There's no way around it. And I think most people avoid that work. And I avoided that work. And there's times when there's days where I still want to avoid that work. It doesn't go away because the work gets harder and it gets bigger, but you get bigger and you get stronger and you're more inclined to handle it. And bringing it full circle, procrastination. How many of us just don't do the thing that we know will get us to where we want to be because it scares us or because we don't want to fail? Or on the flip side, I like the fear of success. What does that look like? Am I good enough? Who am I to deserve all this? And I think we get caught up in that thought process of I'm not good enough. And it really just spoils us from taking the first step. And I think that's a big reason for everybody's procrastination is just not wanting to do the hard thing until you have to, right? So given the opportunity, if I went to the doctor and they said, listen, if you don't start eating chicken, rice, and broccoli every meal for the next 5 years, you're going to die. Like, sure as shit, you're going to die. Guess what? There's still some people that are going to go out there and go eat some buffalo wings and die, but a good percentage of people, probably more than the people that would choose the chicken wings, would choose the chicken and rice because they want to live. You have to be forced into taking that action. And I'm no different. I had to get screwed over to take some money and finally invest it in myself and start my own business. For years, I had the business plan. For years, I had the idea, but I didn't have the belief. And it was half a belief. And half a belief is good, but if you don't start, half a belief is no belief. So you have to believe enough to just get started. And then the failures will come. And you have to pick yourself up and know that that's all part of the game.
Well, I think you hit on a couple of really important things there. The first one is, that whole imposter syndrome. Who am I to be here? And this is something that plagues a lot of people, especially in terms of schooling, certificates, certifications, PhDs. And we tend to not realize that, Donna, the housewife, who has 20 years of raising a family, and she's been, she's been balancing the checkbook, she's been doing the finances, she's been, doing everything, cooking, cleaning. And, she goes out and wants to be an interior designer, and nobody will go to her because, she's great at interior designing, been doing it her whole life for her family. And nobody wants to talk to her because she doesn't have an interior design degree. What do you have to say about that?
What was her name? Donna, you said?
Yes.
Well, I tell Donna that is normal. Forget the interior design degree. You don't have the chops. You don't have the 20 years experience. If I wanted a babysitter, I'd call you. But if I wanted interior design, I need to see your body of work. So what Donna's got to do is understand that is what she's going up against. And she's going to hear more no's, but she's got to stay resilient. And she's got to believe in her heart that she's a great interior designer. And she didn't have to read any books. She just had to do it. So there are plenty of stories of people who are not book smart, who have excelled, because they just had the work ethic to learn. They wanted it more. And I think Donna, after 20 years of giving of herself to her children and her husband and her family in that life, if she's hungry enough, she'll find it, because now it's time for her. And to go a little deeper into that, I mentioned that raising a family is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And because it lasts a lifetime, bro. It's not a 2-year commitment. It's not a 2-month commitment. It's till death do us part. My daughter and I had the conversation yesterday about death, and she's like, oh, and I'm like, well, God willing, you bury us, we don't bury you, because we had just went to a friend's son's funeral, 20 years old, lost his life riding a motorcycle. He was a good friend of mine when I was younger, and even though we grew apart, it broke my heart, because I can't imagine that feeling of losing a child. I got a little lost in my train of thought there. I apologize, but that really just brought me back to a place. So I apologize.
No, that's all right. We were just talking about, Donna and Gail going after what she really wants, but understanding that if she doesn't have the certification, then she.
So when it comes to raising a family, the woman's role, and Donna's a housewife. I heard a beautiful quote. When baby's born into a family, the man is now this and a father. Whatever the mother was doing up to that point doesn't matter. She is now a mother. So the motherhood is her identity, whereas the father is still who he was, plus this. The mother's identity completely shifts, where she's now a mom. She's not the real estate mogul. She's not the salesperson, the teacher, whatever it is. She's the mother first. And Donna, after 20 years, must want to exercise some of that, But that's a testament to, she didn't just come up with that. She had something inside of her that she was called for more. And I think a lot of people have that and just don't answer the call. So kudos to this Donna character. And I would just tell her to keep pushing. No's are one step closer to a yes. And you are good enough and you have everything you need to be a great interior designer. And if they can't see it yet, they'll see it later once they see your body of work that you've developed.
Excellent. And thank you for that. And just swinging back to, we were talking about school and how important schooling is. You need school to basically learn how to learn and to learn how to operate within a set of rules. Bell rings, you go to the next class. The horn blares at your construction site or your job site or your cubicle. You go to lunch, you come
Gives
back.
you the structure. Gives you the structure. It's designed that way too, not to be pessimistic. It's designed to make sure that we're training a potentially good employee for the system later. So it is designed that way. And again, when I was in school, me personally, I always felt there was something off. Like I learned a lot, but it wasn't like it was still the relationships and the things I learned from others because I just never had a vocation in mind. If you're an engineer, you need school. If you're a doctor, you need school. But then there's also things that are going to come along the way, and that's not just doctor and engineer. There's plenty of professions where if you're going to be in a profession, school is the catapult to get into that career path. And then for others like myself, you kind of just go through the motions, and you may even do well at times, but it just doesn't feel right because you don't know what it is that you want to be doing yet. And that was me. I was in school, liberal arts associates, economics bachelor's, and my minor in advertising and public relations is really what I leaned into, which is essentially marketing, but not traditional marketing in a corporate sense where, we're spreadsheets and we've got ideas and ad campaigns and rollouts. It's how do I market myself as someone in business? And I've been pretty successful at that because I've been fortunate enough to, again, learn some lessons that have put me on the right path and have some good guidance along the way.
What would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned, or the most important lesson that you learned, besides that whole accepting, being able to take a no?
If you think you can, you can. If you think you cannot, you cannot. Either way, you're right. I heard that when I was very young, probably 4, 5, 6 years old, from my mother. And it came from a book called The Little Engine That Could. And it was about this undersized train that it had to get the toys up the hill. And the whole way it's struggling to get up because it's too much weight and his little caboose. But he's just, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And I remember that story just fucking stuck out. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. And no clue what it took. But I just knew I was meant for more and that this wasn't it for me. The projects, the crack, the poverty, the violence, the drugs, not for me. I'm meant for more. So faith, belief. Most important lesson that I've ever learned was if you think you can do it, you can do it. The only person stopping anybody from achieving anything is themselves. Now, don't get me wrong. There's people that set out to do and accomplish things and they fall short. Maybe it wasn't in the cards, but I can guarantee they don't regret going for it. I wish I wouldn't have tried to do that great thing and fell short. I mean, get that person in an interview with me. I'd love to pick their brain because I've rarely met people who have went for it or challenged themselves and not been better off for it. So believe that you can and take the first steps. Imperfect action. Just fucking do it. 3 most important words in marketing history. Just do it. Best slogan ever. And you don't have to know how you're going to do it. You don't have to know what the outcome's going to be, but just do it. And my life has been a testament to just doing things and figuring it out along the way, mostly through making mistakes. So there's no book that can teach that.
No, you're right. The whole resilience aspect and thinking you can, that is a very important lesson. And since we're sort of sidelining into that subject, where do you see yourself in the next year? Besides the book, you mentioned you had a book coming out. Is that coming out this year?
Yeah, Beyond the Bronx. We're hoping end of the year this year, November, fingers crossed. But within the next year, I will be doing a few things. I will still be a committed husband and father, and I will be leaning into professional speaking, and I will be on the circuit because through the book and through my efforts, with the podcast and social media and just trying to make impact in the world, I'm putting myself around the right people that can help me use my gifts and share my message to lift others up. So that's what my next year looks like. It also looks like me minus 30 pounds and even better shape, the best shape of my life. My marriage being even better than it is with better communication and understanding. My relationship with my children being enhanced and growing at every opportunity because I really use them as a lens to put things in perspective and understand how human beings are designed. So within the next year, I mean, so many things, so many things, but just hoping to be a few steps further into this mission that I'm on with real mentors. And, we talked about that, the real meaning, real examples altering lives. And I want to be that. I want to get in front of young adults and teenage kids, and even their parents, and just share my story and offer them some of the tools that they can use with what they have to start taking steps toward whatever it is that they want to achieve in their lives or start to find some fulfillment in an otherwise, money. So we can always find the beauty in the everyday struggle, but we have to shift that perspective, and not everybody knows how to do that.
Shifting perspectives, that is the very pinnacle of setting yourself up for success, for sure. It's just how you frame things.
Life is happening for us at every turn, good, bad, or ugly. There's a reason.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Captain Jack Sparrow. I love that character. That the problem, he's running away from hundreds of people at once, or sliding in. His ship is sinking. He's just on the top. He's poised there. He's just feeling proud of himself, and he gets right to the dock as the boat sinks to the bottom. He's like, he's just nonchalant. He's like, just park it anywhere, guys. The problem is not the problem. The problem is how you look at the problem. It's a very good one. I like that one for a lot, actually. Well, we are coming up close to the end here, but just before we go, Sean, again, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing everything with our listeners. What is the best way that our listeners can reach out to you?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me and giving me the platform. Any of your listeners that would like to find me, you can find me at the Sean Martin on Instagram. That's our biggest platform. So TheSeanMartin. Also, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, all the platforms. And you can also visit SeanMartinSpeaker.com to stay tuned for the speaking engagements, or if you want to get in touch with us. And then there's also BeyondTheBronxBook.com, which will be updated with a release date once we have one. So a lot of things going on, a lot of exciting things. I'm glad to share them with you at the beginning of this pivot. And I can't wait to see, how things develop with yourself and the podcast, as well as, with my own mission.
Excellent. And for sure, we'll be tracking that progress, Sean, and we'll be rooting for you all the way. So once again, thank you again for being on the show, Sean, and thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find inspiration or motivation for yourself today, maybe just try and be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.